Did you know that you might actually need to stop studying? The way you've been taught to study, and the way you've been studying for years might be hurting your grades without you even realizing it. We're all told that studying is the key to good grades, and that makes sense, right? But what if I told you it's like going to the gym for years but doing an exercise incorrectly, causing long-term injury just because you assumed you were doing it right? If you keep studying the way you have been and assume that it leads to good grades, that's a dangerous assumption to make. And that's why most students don't actually know how to study, even though it sounds crazy. Students don't know how to study. That's why studying seems to take so much time, and fewer students feel like they're getting the grades they deserve. I used to be like that too. I never thought my studying methods were wrong, but I always wondered why my grades were low. It wasn't until I actually learned how to study that my grades skyrocketed and I finally got the results I wanted. No matter where you are in your student journey, now is the best time to learn how to study because this will save you so much time. First core principle: how long should you study? One important thing you need to understand is the difference between consumption and digestion of information. Whenever I asked my teachers how long I should study for the upcoming biology test, their answers were always the same. Probably study for about 2 hours. Or 3 hours should be good for this test. Teachers often tell you to spend a lot of time studying before big exams. But what if I told you that it actually doesn't matter, and that there will be no difference in your grades whether you studied 2 hours or 10 hours? That might sound controversial, but I used to obsess over the consumption side of things, just like schools do. I thought that if I read more pages, if I spent more time studying, then I would remember more. But if you think about it, none of that really matters if the information you're consuming doesn't stick in your brain. What matters is the digestion and absorption of information. This is much more important than the amount you consume. For example, if you study for 5 hours but your retention rate is 10%, you're really only learning 0.5 hours of content. But if you study for 1 hour with a 50% retention rate, you'll actually learn the same amount, 0.5 hours, in just 1 hour. How can you improve retention and absorption? You may have never even thought about this side of the equation. Just like me, you probably only focused on the consumption side. But according to the learning pyramid, the way you study and the method you use has a huge impact on how much you retain and the effectiveness of your study. When I used to study just by reading my notes, it took forever and I did poorly on my tests. But after learning about the learning pyramid, everything started to make sense. Reading your notes, as you can see, only has a 10% retention rate, which is why rereading notes is considered a really bad study technique. Research shows that these passive forms of revision work, but they take a lot more time. On the other hand, if you do past papers, which have a 75% retention rate, you can get the exact same information, the same amount of knowledge, in 7 times less time. So when you study, you should always aim to do the majority of your studying using more active methods like past papers, practice questions, and flashcards. How to study every day for better results. Now that you understand the importance of focusing on retention and digestion of information, the next thing you need to understand is how to make studying consistent and how to space out your study sessions for maximum effectiveness. Now you know that focusing on retention and digestion of information is more important than just consuming large amounts of material. The next important thing is to make your studying consistent, which means repeating the process over and over again. For example, if you have 10 hours of material to learn for an exam, you need to study it in a way that makes sense. If you study 6 hours 2 days before the exam and 7 hours the day before, you're doing it wrong. Just like digestion happens between meals, studying works best when you space your sessions out. This is what spaced repetition and the spacing effect are all about. Cramming is much less effective than spacing your study time out over 2 weeks, studying 1 hour a day. Not only will you retain more, but your focus will also be higher because of the spacing effect. You'll also feel less burdened, and you're more likely to keep studying again and again because it feels like a regular habit. Never cram, so remember, cramming is much less effective than spreading out your study sessions. If you spread 13 hours of studying over 2 weeks, studying for just 1 hour a day, you'll remember much more and feel less stressed. By spacing out your study sessions, it will feel less like a chore and more like part of your daily routine. The more you do this, the more consistent and habitual studying will become, and it will feel easier. Studying doesn't have to be a burden. It's not about how long you study, it's about how effectively you study. Learning can happen if your brain isn't allowed to digest the information, so don't just sit down and study for hours. Give yourself time to forget, study 1 hour a day, and come back tomorrow to reinforce weak areas. This is how you study, and I hope this video changes your perspective on studying. Good luck with your studies, and I'll see you in the next video.